New York, the home of Wall Street, the home of the largest and most prestigious stock market in the world. In the early days of the outbreak, the large Wall Street companies wanted to ensure their assets remained protected. They could see the situation quickly escalating and predicted that the government wasn't going to be able to keep the peace for long. So they brought in some outside help to defend their various corporate interests. And this is where we're introduced to the Last Man Battalion.
From the first time I put on a uniform, I knew I was on the path to become the man I was destined to be. I knew I had accepted a burden that was going to last a lifetime. And even when I left our country's military behind, my obligation for service remained. That obligation is one I and all the men and women of the Last Man Battalion take seriously. We will get the job done. We will serve with honor and dignity, and we will, if necessary, fight to the very last man. Because that is who we are and what we do.
The Last Man Battalion. Security you can count on.
The Last Man Battalion, or LMB, are a private military company made up of US military veterans who were brought on board by their leader, Charles Bliss, who himself was a former US Army officer. Charles Bliss was a former United States Army's 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment, Delta Force. He was proud of the uniform and knew from the moment that he first put it on that he would continue to serve long after he left the military behind. Bliss leads with an iron fist. Duty, honor, and peace through strength were his guiding principles. He holds a deep love and respect for his troops, both in the Army and the LMB. This in turn inspires fierce loyalty from the troops under his command. After Bliss retired from the armed forces, he decided to work in the private security sector, and this is where he first created the Last Man Battalion. In the early days of the outbreak, Bliss was contacted by an associate about the situation in New York.
Hi Rick, it's Charles. I got your message regarding the situation in New York, and I think you're absolutely right. Things are going to get out of hand, faster than the government realizes. They're going to lose control before they've even signed the deployment orders. If you ask me, the only thing that's going to work is to impose absolute authority on the population. People are scared and angry, and that's when they'll act stupid and risk the lives of others. I've seen it too many times. Now you want to shut those instincts down and enforce zero tolerance. Anything beyond that is not going to produce results. And in the long run, that will cost you a lot more than hiring my people.
Bliss went to work placing a proposal on the type of security detail he could offer one of the larger financial businesses in the area.
Hey Charles, this is Nancy again. I've reviewed your mission proposal, and I think it looks solid. I believe the board of directors will have no problem approving it. The only thing that stands out, perhaps, is the lack of support on Wall Street, but I think we all understand that under the circumstances, it's best to prioritize our primary assets in Midtown. I'm sure our foreign investors will be delighted to hear that you're taking them into account as well. Anyway, the board will be reviewing the plan in 2 hours or so. Just thought I'd send you a heads up. Talk to you soon.
Their goal was to protect the buildings and their physical assets by any means necessary, until the situation had been resolved and the city was back to normal. As the crisis worsened, many of the companies left the city, but the LMB remained and continued to protect the sites. But as time went by, Bliss and his forces saw the city go from bad to worse. He was growing tired of standing by and watch the city fall into complete chaos. The indecisive local authorities and the government's complete lack of ability to control the situation was only becoming more clear as the days passed. By the time that the general public realized that this was more than just a bad flu outbreak, Bliss had already come to the conclusion that there was no point in handing over his men's lives in order to protect some physical assets, because at the rate things were going, there would be no one coming back to use them anyway. After the JTF withdrew from the city, Bliss decided that it was up to the LMB to restore order to New York.
What we need to do is assess our resources and define our mission statement. The statement is clear. We must retake control. And with the resources we have left, it's also clear we can't afford any half measures. Every soldier counts. Every soldier is a critical resource. There are no reinforcements being deployed. There is no air support. We work slow and steady. We secure the city sector by sector, and then we hold them for dear life. I need you all to be on your feet, ready to make some quick decisions. It's better to shoot someone innocent than to let someone guilty get away. And it's better to shoot first than to risk being shot, even if you're not 100% sure. That's how we will win this war. That's how we will save this city. Collateral damage is to be expected.
Although Bliss was a man of his word, and that breaking contracts was generally not in his nature, he dumped his Wall Street clients, knowing full well that their motivation was pure self-interest. He saw no greater good in risking his men's lives to guard the dead server farms of large financial organizations.
Charles, listen to me. This is a breach of contract. You were hired to secure our assets as agreed upon, and you've left them vulnerable. We're talking billions in damages here.
I don't give a damn about your assets, Nancy, not anymore. We followed our contract to the letter, and in return, you stuck my men in here under government-issued quarantine, expected to protect empty buildings in a dying city. Well, I can't ask him to do that. We've got bigger fish to fry.
You're not going to get away with this, Charles.
What are you going to do? Sue me? You and your family are going to die. You will all die if I don't do something here. Something more important than keeping watch over a dead server farm. Oh, and see someone about that cough. It sounds nasty.
Bliss went on to disobey direct orders from local JTF. This action had Bliss and his entire company labelled as mutineers and enemies of the government. Convinced that not just New York, but the whole country will collapse under the spread of the virus, Bliss tells his people that the LMB will use any and all means necessary to make sure that they and the city survived. That only a strong hand could salvage and restore what was left. With the financial backing now gone, Bliss would now have to assess the available resources and plan every step of the way. The LMB were running the area, demanding absolute control with zero tolerance for disobedience or differing point of view. Any dissent or even questioning of the LMB operations would result in instant retaliation, with even minor incidents resulting in death at the hands of the LMB soldiers. In an attempt to keep their numbers bolstered, the LMB would often capture JTF and members of other factions that they saw as beneficial to their cause, and give them the option of either joining up or being killed. With the JTF pushed back to the brink of collapse, it wasn't long before the LMB were widely known as being the strongest faction in Manhattan. And eventually with this came the offer of an alliance from someone who would forever change the outcome of this conflict. Former First Wave agent turned rogue Aaron Keener approached Bliss with a proposal that would benefit both sides. Keener needed the LMB to help establish dominance in the city, and through doing so, the LMB would have access to cutting-edge SHD technology available to all division agents, who Bliss knew would become a problem in the days to come. Together, Keener and Bliss launched many operations against the other factions, the JTF and the Division. One of the most notable being the bombing of a JTF helicopter that was carrying the Division's second wave commander, as well as the majority of the New York second wave agents. It wasn't until the Division picked up an SHD transponder signal that they would realize the true threat of the LMB. On their way through the New York Police Academy building, they were met with heavy LMB resistance. Once they made it down to the basement, they found the transponder. it would reveal that not only were a number of First Wave agents still alive, but that they had gone rogue and joined forces with the LMB. But even with the rogue agents in their ranks, the LMB failed to defend the site from the SHD agents. Next, the JTF intercepted a signal coming from the Russian consulate. Inside, a Russian scientist claims to have information on the green poison, so the division agents were quickly sent in to extract him. However, Keener and the LMB were one step ahead. While the division agents were tied up with the LMB, rogue agents grabbed the scientist and escape in a helicopter. At this point, the LMB numbers are starting to suffer through casualties to the division. The communication hub at Quinn's tunnel construction site was next to be taken down by the division and JTF, and the Grand Central Station, which acted as a strategic forward base, also met an abrupt end at the hands of the division. The supplies, ammunition and manpower lost at these sites were now starting to be felt throughout the LMB ranks. As the government forces continue to push forward, the LMB eventually fall back to their main headquarters, the United Nations building. It's here, alongside Keener's rogues, that the LMB will make their last stand. However, Keener had other plans. He realizes that the LMB are finished and will be quickly dealt with by the division. So he evacuates with the Russian scientist, instructing 2 of his rogue agents to stay behind and jam the SHD tracking software, allowing them a clean getaway. The JTF and the division launch a huge attack. The majority of the LMB are killed in the UN building as the division agents sweep through. When Bliss hears of Keener's betrayal, he is thrown into a state of rage. But before going after him, he decided to deal with the second wave agents storming the compound. Staying true to himself, Bliss displays the attributes that he expects from his men: loyalty and honor, by staying behind and fighting to the death, rather than simply escaping in his personal helicopter. The division eventually eliminates the LMB command, and then finds themselves in direct combat with the leader of the Last Man Battalion. Bliss's helicopter is eventually shot down by the agents, killing Bliss in the process. The remaining LMB personnel evacuated the building, most going into hiding. But it wasn't long before one of Bliss's officers jumped in to continue his work. Captain Perez has taken position inside a water treatment plant, where his squad of LMB have a fully functional armoured personnel carrier. However, it wasn't long before news of this reached the government. They decided that the best course of action would be to bomb the plant before the LMB can take it out onto the streets. But the division disagreed, saying that the loss of the water treatment plant would only slow down the progress towards rebuilding the city. So they launched an attack against the LMB to shut them down, before the government proceeded with destroying the facility. The agents were successful in stopping the LMB and taking down the APC, along with Captain Perez. The splintered PMC scatters, and are no longer a major threat to the city. It wasn't until the JTF began moving into the West Side piers that the LMB would be heard from again. Through an agreement with the Rikers and Cleaners, they team up with a common goal in mind: to hunt down the man who had betrayed them, most of all the LMB, Aaron Keener.
Now, the brass says there's a good reason for us to be working with the others out here. They say they've called a truce, maybe even made an alliance, because all of us have gotten screwed, one way or another, by that piece of shit, Aaron Keener. And they say Keener's been spotted on the West Side piers. And that's why all of us are moving in, to hunt that little bastard down.
Although the shared hatred brought them together, the LMB weren't all happy about the situation.
So imagine us, the LMB, last bastion of combat discipline on this island. Professional soldiers, from top to bottom. Now, imagine us teaming up with the Rikers and the Cleaners. because that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to be patrolling together, doing joint ops, everything. And I have got to tell you, I don't like it one little bit. But man, I just don't get it. We beat those other guys. One group's crazier than a shithouse rat, and the other's a mob with no discipline. What the hell do they have to offer us? You ask me, it's going to be more work keeping them in line than we'll get out of them. If you ask me, it's not worth it. But nobody's asking me, which is typical.
Several months later, the LMB have been pushed back to a mere shadow of their former selves. After the loss of their commanding officers, most have split up into small leaderless groups, with a number of others seeking refuge among the other factions, including the JTF. After the Black Tusk made themselves known in Washington DC, they suffered massive casualties at the hands of the SHD and their operatives. Looking for ways to boost their numbers, while in New York, they came across members of the once powerful faction of the Last Man Battalion. With their experience in the field, particularly with the division, the Black Tusk offered them a place within their ranks, and the opportunity to avenge the death of their leader, Charles Bliss. The LMB were absorbed into the Black Tusk and given a position within the newly created unit known as White Tusk. The White Tusk are an elite division of the Black Tusk. They consist of experienced Black Tusk soldiers, along with the remains of the Last Man Battalion. They are a more lethal, more advanced and experienced unit of their BTSU counterparts. While the LMB as a faction no longer exists, the remnants of this once powerful group are now armed with new tech and weaponry, and are a part of a much larger, more established PMC. They have been given a new start and a new purpose: the eradication of the division. This video was originally intended to be a small update to the Last Man Battalion story, to bring it up to speed with the full story as it currently stands in the Division 2. But after reviewing my original video from over 3 years ago, I realised that it was only my second or third video on the lore of the game, and that I've probably learned a thing or two since then, and didn't really do their story justice. So I decided to consolidate it into a full video. I actually noticed a few others that need an update, that I might do the same thing with if I have the time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!